what's inciting a violent insurrection against your own government?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Well, you're saying there's one thing about asking a question.
What happens when a top Democrat tries to corner a witness and it completely backfires? In this hearing, Congressman Raskin pushed hard trying to force a narrative, but what unfolded instead raised serious questions about consistency, political bias, and how far some are willing to go to score points. Before we break this down, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay informed with clear, no-nonsense analysis you won't get anywhere else. Let's get into it.
Raskin, the ranking member.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And Ms. D'Andrea, I'm moved by some of your political statements. One of the things you said at the end of last year was, if any political figure or party can direct federal law enforcement against its critics, we no longer live under the rule of law. Do you remember when you wrote that?
Yes, sir.
So do you reject Donald Trump's very public orders to the Department of Justice and the FBI to investigate and prosecute James Comey, Letitia James, Adam Schiff, a bunch of other colleagues, including Jason Crow?
I would say if there's reason and there's evidence to investigate those people, then he's absolutely right to call for it. If not, then he doesn't need to call for that.
Wait, you said if any political figure can direct federal law enforcement against its critics, we no longer live under the rule of law.
I think there's a difference between someone being critical and someone doing something that violates the rule of law.
Okay, but all of it, I mean, the reason why all the grand juries refused to render indictments, the reason why a number of prosecutors resigned or were forced out of their positions were because of the obvious point that Donald Trump is attacking them because he perceives them to be political critics or adversaries of his. And so it would seem to me, just to apply your rule to the facts of the situation, Donald Trump is absolutely taking us outside of the rule of law. I mean, I don't mean to embarrass you in any way, but I liked your statement of principle, and I'm wondering whether you're willing to interpret it in a completely obvious and objective way.
I would say that my interpretation is objective, and I think that without having all the facts about each of these individuals and each of the allegations allegedly, against them, I can't speak generally to the president's statement. I stick by my original statement.
If any president, whether it was Maduro or Trump or Oscar Orlando Hernandez, says, I want you to go and investigate and prosecute these 20 political enemies of mine, your position would basically be agnostic. Well, let's wait and see what happens in the investigation. Is that right? Doesn't that defeat the whole point of your statement?
Respectfully, that's not right. That's not what I mean. That's not what I intended to say.
All right, well, let me ask about another one. I wish we had all day, because you've said some interesting things, which I agree with at the level of generality at which you stated them. For example, you said that Maduro had refused to cede power. I think it was in the 2024 election, and you said that it's impossible to sustain a claim to lawful governance by a leader who holds office in defiance of his own electorate. Well, that really made me think about what happened in 2020, when Donald Trump claimed that he won the election, but the Congress found that he had not won the election. 60 federal and state courts rejected every claim of electoral fraud and corruption. But not only did he claim that he won it, he continues to claim that he won it. So I hope you would repudiate that.
Thank you for the question. I would say that he ceded power. He gave in. The President Biden was sworn in and was the president of the United States. So he did not illegally hold on to power in the manner that President Maduro, illegitimate dictator, did.
So here's the setup. Raskin opens by quoting the witness's own past statement, basically saying that if political leaders use federal law enforcement against their critics, that's a threat to the rule of law. Strong principle. Most Americans would agree with that, but then comes the pivot. Raskin tries to tie that statement directly to President Trump, suggesting that calls to investigate political figures automatically cross that line. And this is where things start to unravel, because the witness makes an important distinction, one that often gets ignored in these hearings. She says if there's evidence, investigations are justified. If there isn't, They're not. That's not controversial. That's basic rule of law. But Raskin keeps pressing, trying to force a blanket condemnation without addressing that key condition, evidence. Then the exchange shifts to something even bigger. The 2020 election. Raskin brings up Trump's continued claims about the election and compares it to foreign leaders who refuse to give up power. It's a dramatic comparison meant to frame the situation in the strongest possible terms. But again, the witness pushes back, pointing out a critical fact. Power was transferred, the system held. Whether you agree with Trump's claims or not, the constitutional process ultimately played out. Now here's where the moment really gets intense.
Oh, I see. In other words, because the coup didn't work and the violent insurrection didn't succeed in overturning the election, then you think it was all right what he did.
Respectfully, that's not what I said.
Well,
I said
but that's
that
what
he
I said,
didn't-
though.
he
In other
didn't-
words, you seem to be saying that because his attempt to destroy Joe Biden's electoral college majority, which he won by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the electoral college, because his efforts to overturn that on the floor of Congress and with a violent insurrection, then he complied with what you were stating as a basic rule of law principle.
Respectfully, sir, I think there's a difference between asking whether fraud occurred and refusing to cede power once it's been made clear to you that it hasn't.
Well, what's inciting a violent insurrection against your own government?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Well, you're saying there's one thing about asking a question, for example, going to 60 different federal and state courts to try to get a ruling, but once you've lost all of those, you think it's legitimate within the rule of law and democracy to incite a violent insurrection, as Donald Trump was impeached for?
Sure, I appreciate the question. I don't have a clear answer for you on that.
Okay.
I think the
All right,
evidence.
well, we can discuss it later. And I thank you for your statement of principles, which I think are often quite lucid, but I wish that you would apply them even-handedly across the board. It might be tough from the job that you're in right now. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Raskin escalates the argument, bringing up the idea of a violent insurrection and pressing the witness to declare whether that crosses the line. And instead of giving the kind of sweeping, politically convenient answer he's clearly looking for, the witness pauses. She doesn't give a clean, rehearsed response. She admits she doesn't have a clear answer in that moment. And that right there tells you everything about this exchange, because what you're seeing is the tension between political theater and actual legal principles. On one side, you have a push for broad, emotionally charged conclusions. On the other, a more cautious approach, one that says we need facts, we need evidence, and we need consistency. And that's really the core issue here, consistency. If we're going to talk about the rule of law, it has to apply across the board. Not just when it's politically convenient, not just when it targets one side. Raskin closes by suggesting the witness isn't applying her principles evenly. But many viewers will walk away asking the opposite question. Are these principles being applied evenly in Washington at all? This is exactly why moments like this matter. Not because of who won the exchange, but because it exposes how these arguments are being framed and what's being left out. If you want more breakdowns like this, real analysis, real context, and none of the spin, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And stay tuned, because the next clip we're covering takes this debate even further, and you don't want to miss it.